All right, welcome back to another episode of the Georgia Track and Field Coaching Collective podcast. I'm Andy Christie, coach at Mill Creek High School, um, joined by Nick Hustalakis from Marietta. And if you're watching this, hopefully you've seen at least one of the other two that we've put out there. But if not, who we are, we're a couple of coaches that are passionate about the sport, both cross country and track and field, and we want to put our experiences out there in the hopes that maybe help some coach, whether it's a veteran or a new coach. We want coaches to network, to talk to each other, to share best practices or things that have helped them out, in the hopes that our sports as our state as a whole and our sports improve as much as possible. This is not we happen to be 7A coaches, but this is not a 7A focused collective. This is a state of Georgia collective from, single A all the way up to 7A, whatever classifications, whatever groups. We want everybody to be represented and involved in this. So that's kind of who we are. I stepped on your toes a little, Nick, about why we're doing this. But if you want to throw in your 2 cents a little bit about why we're doing this.
No, thank you, Andy. Nick Hustalakis from Marietta High School. And again, like Andy said, I'm just here to share my experiences, to network with other coaches, to help any new or veteran coaches any way I possibly can, and also pick the brains of some other expert coaches who are out there who have great experiences that can help myself and our kids in my program also. So this is all about networking. And the one thing I'm going to mention this that I haven't mentioned in other few podcasts, but the one thing about our great sport of track and field and cross country is all of us coaches are intermixing throughout the meets. We're working the meets together. We're coaching our kids together. Whereas when I used to coach tackle football and varsity basketball, we are on opposite sidelines and you're not interacting. But in our sport, we interact. We interact quite a bit. And we need to network and we need to help each other out as much as possible. I'm by no means a guru or an expert. You're going to hear me say that a lot. I'm not. There's so much that I don't know that I don't walk around here acting like I know everything. What I do know is what works best for my program from my prior 15 years of experience within my program. Hopefully those experiences will benefit y'all. And hopefully some of this is it relates to you as well. And if not, we're going to try to give you suggestions any way we possibly can from pulling from our prior experiences so we can help improve the sport and make this a quality experience for every kid in your program is what we all want. That's why we're doing this. So with that being said, Andy, let's kick it off.
All right, sounds good. So this episode is going to be about scheduling. Nick is a head track and field coach. I'm a head cross country coach, also assistant track coach. But we come at this from a couple of different angles that we're going to cover in terms of how we put together a schedule and the meets that we want to go to. So since we just finished track season, I'll turn it over to Nick to kind of kick off this discussion.
Yeah, so within the GHSA, if you're a GHSA school, you may not be. If you are a GHSA school, we're allowed 12 meets throughout the season, 12 varsity meets. However, your athletes have a limit of 10 meets. So when I look at these, when I try to put together a schedule for our program, I'm trying to make sure that all the needs are met within my program, meaning I want to make sure that our sprinters and our relay kids are going to be tested, are going to be tried before we get to the state meet. I want to make sure our endurance athletes, our distance kids have good competition to go up against. I want to make sure our field event athletes have competition to compete against. So when we are looking at a schedule from start to finish, when we're allowed to compete in early February all the way through the regional meet in mid-April, we want to make sure that we pack those 2 months with as much competition to be able to prepare our athletes for the state meet at the end. So my focus early in the season, the cold months, the Januaries and the Februaries, where you have a partial team, where you still have fall sports overlapping with your spring sports. For example, your wrestlers, your swimmers, your basketball players, those athletes are going to be coming out late. In the meantime, your distance athletes are just coming off the fall. Any true endurance program is going to continue in the winter. Those athletes are typically better prepared for the season than anyone else because your other athletes most likely are playing another sport, or they didn't have the benefit of having a full sprint season in the fall like your endurance athletes had a full cross country season. So they're coming in early winter, probably in better shape than anyone else in your team. Which is why early on, I'm going to look for some type of distance carnival. I'm going to look for something like that is what we're going to do. However, the first varsity meet that I'm going to take my program to, I want it to be a challenge. We have always traveled far. We've always, where we are in Cobb County, we've traveled to Gwinnett. We've gone to the Archer meets. We've gone to the Jerry Arnold's. We've gone to the Roswell 8-way meet. We've done various big invites for the very first meet because I want my athletes to know in the off season what they're preparing for. I want to make sure that we're going to be traveling. We're going to go see 20, 30 plus schools at this huge stadium that you're going to see. And it's going to be at some point in February, early March. Weather's not going to be ideal. And I want my kids to understand they have to be prepared for that. So practice is going to take a little bit more serious of an approach when they understand what they have coming up. So early on, for my varsity kids, I'm looking for some type of distance event right away for my distance kids, and then I'm looking for a big invite, whether it's Archer, Jerry Arnold, whatever it may be that we've gone to in the past. That is good enough to get our kids excited. Now, mid-season, what I'm looking for in mid-March, spring break time as you're getting in there. Now, this is where your winter sport athletes are coming back over. Like I just said earlier, you have to get them ready. They're coming off of 5-6 weeks less of training than everybody else. They're coming from a different sport. You're going to have to get them acclimated. For a lot of our varsity kids in that group, I'm also looking for competition. Our sprinters, our jumpers, our relay team, they need competition. They need stimulus just about once a week. If I'm going to go a weekend without a meet, which we do when we have typically the New Balance indoor weekend in early March is when we'll host the middle school meet. But when I go that 1 weekend without a varsity meet, I notice it. I notice it in the tempo of my practices. The kids need the stimulation. Practice is always taken serious. We take the process very serious, but there's nothing that matches lining somebody up in an opposite uniform in the lane next to them. That's going to get them ready for competition. So for us, we're trying to find some competitive meets early season for our varsity, mid-season for our varsity winter sport athletes that are just crossing over to the sport. And then at the end of the season, I'm looking for only quality. I'm not going to take my kids to some random meet where they're not going to get challenged. I'm going to take my kids somewhere where now specifically for us, and this only applies to Marietta, this might not apply to somebody who lives in mid or South Georgia, but for us, I'm going to take my team the last weekend that we can compete. McEachern has an invite. Our sectional meet and our state meet the last few years I've been in McEachern, so we're going to go to McEachern on a big invite. I'm going to put all my varsity athletes that will be in the region lineup in one, maybe two events, which we'll talk about later in another podcast. But only for quality. I'm looking for just straight quality so they can get experience in that stadium, in that facility. Now, for my JV athletes, your developmental athletes, you need to give them an opportunity to compete. Your weeknight meets are an amazing opportunity for a beginner, whether they're a junior beginner who has varsity experience or varsity talent, but just not the experience yet. You can develop them and bring them on in a tri meet, a quad meet on a weeknight all throughout March. And you can do that all throughout March. You will find schools that want to come and bring a small a group to do a tri quad meet, whether you label it a JV meet, varsity meet, it doesn't matter. But those meets are specific for reps, for practice. If you have an injured varsity athlete just coming back, who is going to be a 3-event kid, a 4-event kid at the state meet, but yet they just need the reps and they just got cleared. You might be able to throw them in on a Wednesday night meet to get a race, one race, a relay leg, something to kind of shake the rust off and get going. So you can use these meets, but for us, we use the meets specifically to help develop our athletes to get to where we want to get to. Where we want to get to is be our fastest at the end of the season. So early on, we're looking for some quality. We're looking, from the sports psychology spot, we're going to take our kids to a random meet at a new facility that they've never seen, and we're not going to let them know a whole lot about it other than we're going to get there. They're going to have to go see their field events. They're going to have to go out there and see their runways, see their area, and adjust quick and make it happen, regardless of the weather, regardless of whatever. And we try to challenge our kids that way to prepare them for whatever they're going to see. 2 years ago, we had to go down to TIFF. Our kids have never been down to TIFF for a sectional meet, let alone our kids were taking the Google Maps shots to see what the facility looked like. You know, in a situation like that, you're competing to get to the state meet. You've been working all year. You know, you better be prepared with your technique, with your fundamentals, with your training, because your experience with the facility may not be there. So we try to challenge our kids in that type of way to prepare them for those types of situations throughout the season as much as possible. We do not look to win the early meets. We do not set a lineup to maximize. Although early meets are looking for the development of the athlete, not the end result of the team. So my mindset when I'm looking at this is what's going to benefit our kids so they can be at their best at the end. And for some people, you know, finances, transportation, all that plays a factor. So if proximity is what you are given, like, hey, you can't travel more than 5 miles. You have to stay within the county or within the whatever. Then that's what you have to do. Make the best of it. And you may have to host them. You may have to do some creative time trials within your program to get your kids stimulated. But for us, the schedule is important. There's a theme to every meet we go to. There's a purpose for every meet we go to. We try to make sure that every group is challenged throughout the season, and we try to take our kids to bigger meets if we feel they're going to be competitive. If we have a developmental team, I'm not going to take my kids to as competitive of a meet. Spring break, I took my kids to Arcadia because we knew we were going to possibly competing for a state championship. But if I don't have state caliber athletes, I'm not taking them to Arcadia with national athletes. So I've done that twice in my 15 years because it was applicable for that group of athletes at that time. So we're going to use the schedule to try to challenge and prepare our athletes for the state meet as best possible.
Couple of things that I wanted to touch on that you mentioned in particular. What you just mentioned, that taking athletes to meets based on where your team is at. I think I've had years where, you know, if I have a lot of returners and we feel like we have got a pretty strong squad, then yeah, out of the gate, I'm gonna kind of challenge them or take them to maybe a higher level meet. And then I've had some teams where if I do that, I risk demoralizing them right away.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, I just cannot do that. I've got to go to another meet that's a little more where they are, meet them where they are,
Correct.
so that I don't lose them right away. And compared to, you know, and they're like, oh no, where, you know, how's the season going to be, you know? So I've adjusted in that way. And another thing you mentioned with the weekday meets, I don't know if this is just a distance coach thing or not. I know we're a unique breed sometimes, but we'll compare notes about who's going to run in like the mile, 2 mile. I'll email the coach at
Yeah.
the other school and say, hey, like I'm holding out so and so, but I am going to run this person so that we can hopefully get some matchups instead of just the random kid having to run a 1600 by themselves because the other school isn't bringing their top
Correct.
kids. So that's
No,
something
and
that
what
I've
you're
done.
doing there, Andy, is you're catering to the kid, which we need to be doing at that
Mhm.
point, right? So yeah, you're just
Yeah.
catering to the development of that kid and making sure they have the competition on the track so they can get pushed a little bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
From a cross country perspective, you know, a lot of the things you said are similar in terms of what I'm wanting to do throughout the season. Um, you know, early season, sometimes, well, we kind of do a little different in terms of we start with a 2 mile race, and then the rest of the season's 5Ks. So we've gone to different 2 mile races over the years to kind of, and it's a nice easy way to ease into the season. Um, and then we'll get into the 5Ks later. Um, it's funny because some races are just kind of standard. Like we know we're going to go to our Gwinnett County meet. We know we're going to obviously region, state, um, and then other races end up being, at least it depends on the program. You have your favorite races that maybe the kids just love, and maybe that as a coach, I've even attempted to like switch things up, and then I hear a resounding no, we want to go to this meet, and I say,
Right.
okay, I'm gonna,
Yep.
if it fits in with what I want to do for the season, then I'm like, okay, I hear you guys, we'll go to that meet again. Um, for for me, a growing experience has been, though, not just doing something because we've always done it, in terms of we've always gone to
Right.
this meet, every year that the school's been open or whatever, or that I've been there as a coach. And that's tough because sometimes there's meets that I really enjoy, but if it doesn't serve the needs for what
Correct.
we as a
Yeah.
program need anymore, then I have to kind of pivot and go somewhere else. Um, and so I've done that, and a few times, and it gets easier every time I do something like that. It gets a little easier than the previous time, but it's all about, like you said, how are we preparing for region, state, sectionals in the case of track. Um, One thing for cross country that I've done that kind of similar to what you've, I think, maybe done with Arcadia. We started going to Great American about 10 years ago
Yeah.
because it was a really great meet and it still is a great meet in terms of the competition, and it's far away. You're going to see teams that you never see, but it when we started doing that, I noticed a jump in our program in terms of the kids being exposed to higher levels of competition, a meet where they're not going to finish near the top unless you're just a really, gifted team that year. Um, but when you've gone through that kind of race with a talented team, then suddenly when they get to the state meet is actually less competitive,
Yeah.
and it helps them to, I think,
Yes.
perform well. Like you get the
Yes.
state meet, and you're like, hey, you've been at a more competitive meet than this,
Yes.
a more intimidating meet, and you handled it just fine. Just go out there and do your thing again, because this race is
Correct.
not going to be tougher than your Arcadia or your Great American or whatever it is. Um, so, and then the last few years, that worked for a while, and then the last few years we've done something different because my team started needing something different. So it goes back to that point of not just getting stuck in this is what we've done, so we're going to do it again. But that's something that really helped us out. Now, you have like so many great meets in the state of Georgia. There, you don't always have to go out of state to find just
Right.
a crazy loaded invitational. Um, so that's something that I've done in the past to kind of challenge my team. Um, I'm going to throw a question to you about track, kind of going back to post spring break. I know for us, the first race back from spring break ends up being kind of a rust buster, and so in the terms of scheduling, I know as a coach to not necessarily to kind of temper my expectations and know, like, okay, the purpose
Yeah.
of this meet, like every meet should have a purpose. We kind of already talked about that, but the spring break, post spring break meet is one that sticks out in my mind of, I know I might not get the best, like a PR, but it's not for that reason. It's to just put the uniform on again, put the spikes on again, and then we'll hopefully progress at region, sectional, state. Is that something you've thought of?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. So post spring break, you have a lull of we just came back from a long break, a week off, which again, the spring season at our school, we have 2 full week-long breaks, which you're trying to compete and train throughout, right? Which is difficult. You have a week off, and then you're going into the state meet, and there's a lull there. I have yet to walk away from that April 10th meet, whether it's the 13th, it's usually that weekend, right before the region meet, walking out of there feeling satisfied. And I'll be honest with you, 2 years ago, I was so angry with my team. Um, I sent a few home from the meet because I felt like they were not giving us their all because mentally they were checked out. Mentally, they weren't giving us their all. So I get extremely frustrated with that meet because I'm not getting what I want to get so close to the region meet. But at the end of the day, you use the perfect term of rust buster. The kids are coming off a week of being off. Their routine is completely off. And now you're heading into the state meet. At that point, you're not going to make them any better. You can make them worse by injuring them, but you're not going to make them any faster for the state meet at that close to the state meet. So mentally, the kids understand that the meet isn't really um as valuable as you view it as a coach, I think at times, which bothers me sometimes too, that the kid they know that they're not really giving their all. But that's also a meet where I do not load them up. I 1 or 2 events just to stay sharp. They need stimulation. Sprinters, jumpers, that explosive movement, they need that stimulation almost on a weekly basis in season. Unless they need a rest, unless they're overworked. And I'm never going to put a kid in 4 events throughout the regular season unless I'm trying to prepare them for the state meet. Unless they're going to be doing something like that at the state meet, I would do it at some point, obviously before region, to prepare them for it so they have an idea of the workload. But that meet is very frustrating just because of the whole spring break. Right at spring break, we host the spring break and we're off the bat, and it is the most frustrating thing to host as a meet manager because I can't get my kids to continue to help with blocks and hurdles and that type of stuff, let alone staff and parents and all that. Everybody's checked out at that point. It's a tough time at that point, and you need to get everybody back quickly to get them back on board for the state meet, for the region, sectional, and state gauntlet that you're going to go through for the next 3 weekends. Yeah, that's a tough time. That's a tough time, and you better be prepared for it, because if not, your kids will check out on you real quick if they don't feel like, they're going to have a meaningful meet coming up. So to me, that's a tough meet, Andy. That's a tough time. So you
Yeah.
can't be expecting PRs there. You can't. You can't.
And you just, as we kind of wrap this up, so you just brought up something in my mind of I've considered over the years things like homecoming, when or the prom, I guess, for track, but for cross country, when is our homecoming? Because that was some of the conflict with Great American at some point, that we had kids that were getting stranded on the side of the highway because of traffic, and they didn't make the homecoming dance. And I want to be sympathetic to that as a coach and the
Right.
seniors and their senior year experience. And so I'm not saying I'm gonna always base my decisions on that, but it's a consideration for sure. And so yeah, just knowing what potential conflicts there are, like the post spring break meet or the homecoming or the prom. And then like we have fall break, the first weekend of October. And I used to schedule a JV meet right before that fall break. Well, then, like you said, like before spring break, some people are leaving early. Some
Yeah.
people, different plans for different families. So I started realizing I'm not going to do that anymore. Like we're just going to have that week focused on training. I'm not scheduling something for during fall break. Some teams can do that, and that's great. More power to them.
Right.
This gets into the what works for your team. For my team, it doesn't work because they're all gone, and I'm not going to have a meet where most of the team is gone. It's not beneficial to the group. Other meets, sometimes we're training through. I know some coaches don't like that philosophy, or even I've seen some things online where people don't believe in rust busters, although I do. That's why I mentioned it. But to each their own. But if your team is going to need to focus on training for a particular week when it's a month out from the state track meet or the state cross country meet, then maybe there's an invitational where you're like, guys, we're still going to show up and race hard, but you're going to be doing it off of tired legs. And
Yes.
you just need to know that. And it's okay to be tired now for some glory later.
Correct,
So,
Andy. We try to let our kids know going into everything. So for us mid-season, depending on however you label your sessions of seasons, but for us, whether we're in pre-competition or competition phase, I let our kids know, especially in March leading up to that spring break week, is that's when intensity and volume are its highest, and that's where they're intersecting. And that is where everything is at its most intense. That is where most likely when a kid is going to get, at least in my group, most likely you're going to experience some injuries if you're not careful and you're not cautious about it. And on top of that, the kids got to know. Like I had a few kids, I had a hurdler who was a perfectionist, and she had a hard week of work, and then we only stuck her in 2 events, just to sharpen up on some stuff. And she didn't PR, and it was messing with her head. And I had to let her know, like, hey, listen, here's your workload throughout the entire week. You weren't set up. This is practice right here. So the kids have to understand that they got to understand that the necessity of taking it serious and putting forth full effort. However, understanding that the end result isn't the end all be all. The end result is a product of what we did leading up to it. So if we're not happy with the end result, we focus on what we did leading up to it, we adjust, and we focus on the adjustments on the next meet and not focus on the end result, but the process, so to speak. So I don't want to talk in circles, but for us, the schedule it helps us map out our path to the state meet, so to speak, and it helps us get
Yes.
our kids prepared for the state meet. And that for us is a priority. When I first started at first, I didn't have the team to be ready at the state meet. So our priority at Marietta was the region meet. That was the priority to get them ready for. And then, as we progressed as a program and got ready, now the focus is state meet. So for everybody, it's different depending on where you are developmentally, depending on financially what your school district will allow you to do with in terms of travel. If you're even able to host and you can invite and you can bring in certain programs to stimulate, whether it's your field events, your sprint relays, your distance kids, whatever. If you can be creative that way to challenge your kids with your schedule, or if you're fortunate enough to have the fundraising budget where you can travel wherever you need to travel to challenge your kids, like our friends down at Lowndes, those folks are always up here in North Georgia every weekend. I'm just throwing that out there just because I'm that I think that's awesome that they're making the commitment to come on up for travel for scheduling. You want to talk about scheduling? We need to pull them on here and talk about their scheduling and see what they take into account for their scheduling because they're competitive, highly competitive, and they come on up and take everybody up every weekend. They come on up hours on with that drive to challenge people. So,
Yeah.
to each his own. However, wherever your program is developmentally, if local is what you can do, then make the most of it. Train your kids and prepare them for the best. If you can travel and you can challenge your kids, if you have a competitive team and you're trying to challenge them, like you said, Great American gets them ready for the state meet, or whether it's Arcadia or Bojangles or Taco Bell, whatever was called, what it is called. I think that you have to put time and effort into your schedule so your kids can benefit the most, absolutely benefit the most, so they can be at their best at the end of the season.
Absolutely. And I'll close with it can also be a reward for like, hey, here are the like you can put a meet on there that, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, you get to go on this trip. It could be the kid that knocks it out of the park with fundraising. It could be
Right. Right.
kid. I mean, there's all kinds of standards you can set, but we've done that in the past. Especially if somebody has a growing program, you're needing some new numbers, or some bigger numbers, but you can get a kid excited about, hey, we're going to get out of class a couple hours earlier, or we're going to take a
Right.
charter bus, or whatever it is. The scheduling can help you with not just the performance, but with the culture of your team and the excitement surrounding the team. So, um, with that, I think we'll wrap things up. But Nick, you want to tell them where they can find us?
Yeah, you can find us at Georgia spelled out, Georgia TFXC collective.com. That's our website. You can find us on Twitter at TFXC Collective. And you can find us on Instagram at Georgia spelled out _ TFXC _ collective.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we welcome all comments, suggestions, contributions to the website. Again, this is something we want all classifications, all coaches from all different areas to contribute to, and for us as a group to just improve our sports and
Yeah,
network
I'm
and
hoping
work
somebody
together.
can reach out and educate me. So
Exactly. Yeah, we don't, like he said, we don't profess to be experts or gurus. We're just coaches that have some experience and want to share it, and also hear what other people have done and experienced in their career as well. So
Yep.
thank you all for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time.